Well, after more than a year of rising cost of living pressures, it seems Anthony Albanese isn't ticking the competency box for many voters. In a RedBridge review of the Labor government this year, soft-swinging voters from Queensland and South Australia called the Prime Minister weak and ineffective. They said he was a beta male, this particularly on cost of living issues. And then another poll today in the Sydney Morning Herald again showed that support for Peter Dutton was rising while Albanese was losing voters. Meanwhile, media reports in the Sunday Telegraph speculated that former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is considering a comeback and that he's been sounding out colleagues, with private polling showing that he could beat the Teal Monique Ryan in his old seat of Kooyong. Well, Sky News contributor Joe Hildebrand and Director of Headline Advisory Andrew Carwell join me now to discuss. Joe, great to see you. Look, this report about Josh Frydenberg considering a comeback just at the time when it looks like Anthony Albanese is struggling, a second term is no longer a guarantee. What do you make of these reports?
It's interesting. I think it's something that Frydenberg has been considering, has always had in his back pocket, if you like. They say that every politician has a leadership baton in their knapsack, and I don't think that's something that ever went away for Josh. I think, to be honest, the rise of anti-Semitism has had a huge role to play in his thinking. I think that's made him think, all right, this is actually a time for public figures to step up and to fight the good fight and to reshape society. He's, of course, the son of refugees from the Holocaust, so he knows all too well how these things can escalate very quickly. So that has very much moved him, and I know, I've obviously been in contact with him, like I have a lot of other members of the Jewish community, about how worried they are about this rise. So I'm not surprised at all by this. It does present a bizarre challenge for Peter Dutton, I suppose, because immediately, I think Josh Frydenberg is the best chance of beating a Teal, a Liberal beating a Teal in a Teal-held seat. He's also probably a more Teal-friendly leader as well. Peter Dutton has pretty successfully, I think, blown a hole in the side of the Albanese government over the voice and cost of living stuff. But whether he can actually turn that negative for the government into a positive for him, and again, that structural problem with the Teals holding all those touchy-feely, la-di-la, very, very rich, wealthy donor seats is another story.
Andrew Carwell, what's your take on all of this? Because clearly Anthony Albanese is really struggling, not just in the polls, but you can see it anecdotally from voters. There've been so many scandals. He now appears weak on national security after this debacle that was originally sparked by the High Court, but their inept handling of the fact that there were now criminals, sex offenders, murderers walking the streets. At the same time, Peter Dutton, of course, has been very strong in anti-Semitism. Josh Frydenberg, also behind the scenes, not just publicly, but within the Jewish community, has played a very big role in helping to fight this anti-Semitism. How do you think all of these moving parts could fit together?
Yeah, I certainly think, Sharri, that the spiral has got a long way to go here. We're not yet at the bottom in terms of Anthony Albanese's slump in popularity. And there's nothing that I've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks that would give me confidence that they are able to arrest this slide in popularity. In fact, quite the opposite. And the thing that this government has got working against it now is the perception of incompetence. They incompetently managed the Voice campaign. Not necessarily the policy, putting that policy aside, but they were incompetent in the way that they campaigned for the Voice. That's strike number one. The second strike on incompetence is the way that they have handled the immigration saga in the last 2 or 3 weeks. That is a huge incompetence strike against their name. So we're waiting for that third one. And, heading into the Christmas, New Year period, you do not want to put a foot wrong that would confirm in people's mind that you are an incompetent government, or head into next year and start on the wrong foot, because that's going to solidify that belief that this government cannot maintain its position or affect change through policy. So there's some real concerns here on Anthony Albanese's ability to guide Labor through this emerging crisis.
I mean, Joe, I think the problem is that the perception is now starting to settle in that Anthony Albanese is out of touch with the battle people are facing on cost of living. First, it seemed like he was too distracted with the Voice. Then the Voice referendum was finished and he, couldn't stop travelling overseas. It just doesn't seem to people who are really struggling with 13 rate rises that he gets it.
Yeah, I think it is a perception problem more than an actual problem. But in politics, of course, perception is everything. So in a sense, it doesn't matter. My advice to the government would be to launch a big cost of living relief package before Christmas. You do not want voters...
They can't do that with inflation the way it is.
There are ways you could do around it. So, if it was a petrol tax relief, for example, there's debate about whether that would actually be inflationary. It would probably just save people money at the bowser and stop the price of petrol feeding into the price of everything else. So it could actually be deflationary potentially, or rather, not make inflation rise as much as it otherwise is. I think the government has been saved or aided very much by the fact that it looks like we have seen the last of the rate rises in November. There won't be one in December. Indeed, there probably won't be one tomorrow, we hope. And there probably won't be any more. That seems to be what most people are saying. So that has given the government some breathing room. And I think if the government tackles cost of living and is seen to be tackling cost of living, which I think it must do with something like petrol tax relief or something similar, maybe in accord with supermarkets to get them to bring prices down. If it does that, then I think a lot of its other problems and perceived incompetencies will melt away. They won't seem as bad if you get the cost of living stuff right.
Well, you mentioned supermarkets. Andrew, the Senate is announcing that it will be investigating supermarkets, looking at how to get prices down. I mean, this is one clear area. Every family does a weekly grocery shop, particularly school lunches. And, you don't need to be a mathematician and look at the official figures to know that the cost of the most basic things, butter, cheese, eggs, has just exploded.
Yeah, it's certainly starting to hurt. And particularly as we head into Christmas, I think people are scaling down Christmas as much as possible this year, and scaling down holiday activities as well heading into the new year. So the bite is really there. I'm generally all for Senate inquiries that look at potential competitive behaviours between companies and whether there's any cartel-like behaviours. I'm all for that generally, as long as this doesn't become a show trial where senators grandstand and get the baseball bat out on companies.
Isn't that all they ever do, Kazi? That's all they ever do.
It is entirely frustrating. It's the perception. It's the perception that they're taking the baseball bat to the big end of town, and it doesn't really affect any change. So we do need the spotlight on this area, but as long as it's for the right reasons and the right outcomes.
And can I just say, there's actually an opportunity for the supermarkets to sit down with government and with unions and to actually say, all right, what can we do to put pressure on prices?
Comes down to their profits, though.
No, but you could easily have an accord, because companies are really worried about their brands at the moment as well. We've seen what happened with Optus, seen what happened with Qantas. Imagine Coles and Woolies, which pride themselves on being great Australians, sitting down. They call for wage restraint from their workers. Well, why not sit down with someone like Andrew Charlton or a minister of the government and say, right, let's get a new prices and wages accord where we will have wage restraint here on this end. They'd be dealing with the very reasonable Shoppers Union. And you absorb some of those prices into the bumper profits that you've already made during COVID lockdown.
Yeah, those profits were massive during COVID.
Huge.
Now, Joe, I really want to ask you about this exclusive I broke at the start of the program tonight, that Tony Burke, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian arts minister, is presiding over a culture of anti-Semitism in his government departments. I showed the evidence of the artist selected to represent Australia at the Venice Biennale. This is considered the Olympics for the arts community, a very prestigious arts event. He's the solo artist representing Australia in April next year, and he has shared horrific anti-Semitic content online, including a video that he shared on October 8, the day after the terror attacks, which celebrated those terror attacks, called the terrorists freedom fighters.
It's absolutely absurd, and I think part of the problem is that anti-Israel sentiment is so baked into the cultural left and indeed the arts community, which is often the same thing, that people don't even realise the giant red line that they're crossing as they're crossing it. And this might not necessarily extend to their own views. It looks like this artist has some pretty extreme views that are absolutely abhorrent, but it also extends to the sort of people who think, well, okay, this is all right, this is just freedom of expression, or this is okay because, I mean, since when did the celebration of rape and murder represent freedom of expression?
Never.
I really
Exactly.
don't know. And yeah, the posts that you showed, I was unaware of them. I would hope for the government's sake that it was unaware of them and that will act very, very strongly and decisively.
No, but that's the thing. It's horrific because I put questions to Tony Burke today, and instead of coming back and saying we're going to review whether this person still represents Australia, he just said, oh, the posts have now been deleted. That was Tony Burke's response. That is unacceptable. That is disgusting. If there was racist content shared by a white supremacist against Indigenous people, there's no way that person would still be given taxpayer funding to represent Australia. But then when it comes to hatred towards
So
Jews,
if I say
somehow...
on Twitter that I'm enraptured with joy by the rape and murder of innocent women and children, but then delete that post.
Everything's
that's all
fine,
cool.
according to Tony Burke. This is genuinely...
I think you'll find
this is
that,
genuinely
as
unacceptable.
the tension ramps up, they may have to review that.